Hello folks, welcome to the Sunday stream. I thought I would introduce the moon to you. The further back I get, the more you can see that it changes colors. The closer I get, the more moon-like without the colors it gets. So I use this sometimes as a light when I'm doing some work because it provides just enough light to make things happen. It's pretty big, it's bigger than my head. I have a tinier one too of Mars. Pretty sure Mars is bigger than the moon, but in the collection that I have, this is the moon and it is the largest one of these little lights that I have. So we're gonna set it to the soothing color, which looks weird on my skin, but whatevs. Maybe I'll set it to something else. I don't know, we'll figure it out. Oh, and it will go through and rotate colors too, if you have that. The only weird thing is that it plugs in, and when it's plugged in, it will absolutely not light up. You have to have it unplugged in order to light it up, but it is so fun to have, I think. I think it's fun to have. And it's got all the little bumps and dips where craters and asteroids and meteors have hit it. Meteorites? Anyway, so I like this. Welcome, folks. How's the new year treating you? Still good, I hope? I'm going to today focus on, when we get there, our session is going to be about pleasure and what that means to you and the different ways that we can find ourselves experiencing it. And we're also going to do sort of an escalation of this. And you may have been part of this type of thing before, where you have a session and it's like pretty basic, and then you have a session, you're like, wow, that was really impactful. So our goal today is for you to allow yourself to have as impactful a session as you would like, based on your concept of today, what pleasure means to you or what you would like it to mean to you, and for you to allow your unconscious self to get into that mindset of being able to pick and choose the things that are right for you and how they impact you. So here we go. I'm also going to share. So yesterday I was out having like a casual Florida experience day, because there's a lot of fun stuff to do around here. There's a lot of things that are really designed for people to have fun at. Like, it's not just for tourists. There's a lot of locals that live here, obviously, and why shouldn't we take advantage of the things that are there? So went to a local aquarium. I'd been to it once before when it had been in kind of like a falling down location. The building was like crumbling. It was kind of sad. And they only had so many critters in there. The highlight that they had was a tank of manta rays, like the babies. They had a couple of different kinds in there, and you could touch them, and that was super cool. Their skin feels, I don't want to say slimy, but like super soft, like super tactilely soft, and it kind of feels neat. And if you touch other parts of them, it feels like their tail area feels a little bit gritty, just a little bit. Anyway, they're delightful when they're little to play around with. They absolutely will try to eat you. These have been trained very well by all the visitors over the years to expect that if you stick your hand in their tank, that they are going to get some kind of food reward, and you can, buy little bits of shrimp to feed them, and then they'll come up and eat it out of your hand, which is so fun. Highly recommend. I hope you guys get to experience something like that. Even if it's not that, I hope you get to experience something like that. Anyway, they're in a new spot now. It is very, very nice, and I'm excited to see what else they have. They had a petting zoo. They had a reptile lounge with a whole bunch of lizards, always a favorite of mine. They had alligators and tortoises and turtles, and it was really fun to be able to be there and see a couple shows and interact with the animals that are there and to see the things that were there. And then I wandered over to the town part, and I'd never really been there, so did my very best to get lost. It's real hard to get lost, right? Some of these towns are not that big. But I did my best to get lost, and I wandered into this thrift shop, not quite a thrift shop, consignment shop, antique shop. You know, they have all the kitschy things. They had like cool posters on the walls of old movies and a lot of hot rod cars and the knickknacks that your relatives might have had up on in their cabinets and stuff like that. But at one of them, which was actually a comic book shop, so I went to a whole bunch of shops. So there was a comic book shop, like a game shop, that actually had these things. So I don't know if you can see these colors. That this goldish color on the back is not my favorite color. It was pretty orange. So I bought all that they had of these, which was 3, and I painted over the goldish color to a blue, which is my color. And I don't know if you can see the shine on these. I got this set of nail polish in well, I got it for Christmas, but in anticipation that I'm going to actually be painting my nails sometime soon. I'm going to work on growing my nails. That's one of my goals for this year. But look how pretty that shine is. The blue, I think, shines even better than this opalescent kind of thing and this diamondy, other side, then this diamondy kind of thing. So I just thought that was kind of neat to let that happen. Anyway, I like the shine a lot. I have 2 of them in. There were only 3 available. I bought them all. They were pretty inexpensive. And it was pretty nice. So maybe I'll use this as one of our focuses for later today. But I'm absolutely attracted to shiny things. I am sometimes called a magpie. That's maybe a little true. Anyway, so yeah, they're so pretty. Yeah, they are. And it was just so nice to really be able to get out. It was freezing. A thing that I really love to do, especially when guests come to visit me, is to take them on a dolphin tour. So you get on the boat in this charming little Greek town, and it's a 2-hour round trip. You go out, maybe you see dolphins on the way there, but you stop for like a half an hour on this really cute little key that I think is part of a national park. If it isn't, there's a national park sort of right next to it. And you can gather shells and stuff like that. And one time I found like a big horseshoe crab shell, so that was kind of cool. And then you come back, and usually on the way back is when you see all the dolphins. Sometimes on the way out, depends on the season, but usually on the way back, they make sure that they show you all the dolphins you could possibly want to see. Well, that's probably not true. Some people probably want to see a lot more. However, that's kind of fun. So the town, it's just really charming, has a lot of Greek flair. They did get flooded out in at least one of the last 2 hurricanes that we had down here. But they seem to be recovering pretty nicely, and I'm grateful for that because a lot of Florida got hit really hard, and apparently some insurance companies are not paying out, and not for nothing. But when you get 2 back-to-back hurricanes that affect, let's say 3 states, at least for one of them, and then you have like terrible, terrible wildfires, and the wind is so strong that even though the fire department is prepared, they can't really put things out. It kind of sucks. Really, really kind of sucks. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm really enjoying, I was having this in my lap. I haven't had the time, really, but I am enjoying, hello, Germany. Nice to have you here. I am enjoying the idea of doing more ASMR thingies. So we'll see how that goes. It kind of sounds like a basketball. It's got that ting sound to it, but it doesn't, it's too hard. It kind of feels like it. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about pleasure. And I'd like you to find yourself thinking about what that means. Because the important thing for pleasure is that you go at your own speed, right? Like in the traditional recreational hypnosis world, pleasure is like instant orgasms, and that's what it tends to mean almost every time, or some kind of sexual pleasure. But we live in a big world, and there are a lot of people who do not identify with wanting to have that kind of experience, especially maybe if you're having like a casual hypno hookup with somebody. It may not be the sort of thing that you find yourself wanting to do every time. because yes, pleasure is obedience. But you know, sometimes it can lead to something that you're not expecting to find yourself doing. I say this all the time, that pleasure is a gateway drug to other things. When something makes us feel good, we find ourselves inclined to do it again and again and again, or it can lead us to do other things that we find ourselves doing. It can be a slippery slope to where exactly we find ourselves, you know, having behavior that's not quite like what we want. Maybe it is, because maybe sometimes you're like, oh, that was an amazing experience, but... So let's try to eliminate the buts about it today so that you find yourself having an experience that is really powerful for you and really exciting for you, and you don't have to find yourself, you know, worried about anything else. You can just know that whether you're having an experience with something that, say, tastes good, like our gustatory sense is tied into our olfactory sense, so our mouth and our nose, our taste buds and our sense of smell. And that can be a powerful experience all on its own. Sometimes it's just scent. Like I make this Earl Grey tea is my favorite. So when I have Earl Grey tea, which I have a lot, but I have this box of Earl Grey tea I'm almost finished using. And when I cut it open and take the tea bag out, I'm always like sniffing the bergamot that comes from, like, this particular brand has got a really powerful sense of smell, and it's really cool. And then I was also given some cream Earl Grey tea for Christmas, and I can like smell it through the bag, and so the taste is different in each one, obviously, and the scents are different too. And sometimes just smelling that like brings me this little rush of pleasure and happiness. I have definitely, although it hasn't happened in a while, gone out to eat and I take a bite of something and it is so good, right? It's so good that I make a sound like, like I make this sound because it tastes so amazing. And like, it's just like that brief little moment in time, but that can be really powerful for you. And then obviously there can be things that you find yourself hearing or listening to that bring that sense of delight to your brain. And then obviously there's touch. So a lot of people have, a lot of people think that they need touch in order to feel pleasure, if it's that kind of sexy touch. But you could also have like a really good massage or a really good workout or something that like gets your whole body active and flowing and moving, and that can be pleasurable for some people. So let your brain think about all the ways in which, and obviously you could see something that just makes you go, that's so good. I love that. I want that. I want it for myself, or I just want to experience it again and again. So let your brain think about the ways in which you find yourself experiencing pleasure and what kind of pleasure you might find yourself wanting today. And we're going to go into that pretty strongly. We're going to figure out a way to just let your brain, I think I knocked over my little spotlight thing that I have. It's so tiny in here that I can't, the wall is like right there. So I'm not going to get down and get it for myself because I don't really need it right now. Anyway, so let yourself think about what kind of pleasure, what kind of experience you might want to have, what kind of delight you might want to find yourself experiencing. Sometimes people, when they do have something like a full body pleasure experience, sometimes it can be orgasmic in the proper use of that word, and sometimes it's just like, I've got tingles everywhere, or I just felt this rush of energy through my body. However you find yourself doing it, in whichever way you find yourself doing it, whether or not you can actually and actively recall a taste or a smell or a sound or a sensation, because some people are better at doing that than others. But however you find yourself doing it, allow today to be an exploratory session for you to think about how each one of those things makes you acknowledge its presence, and the ways in which you can perhaps find yourself amplifying that. Maybe with suggestion, maybe with thought. Just because I suggest something doesn't mean that your brain has to go, that's the only way that there is to do it. Think of all the ways that your brain, that you find yourself thinking of things, and just let that experience happen as powerfully as you can. There's so many ways that you can find yourself experiencing something that is delightful, something that is pleasurable. And the more you accept that, and the more you find yourself getting into it, the more fun it can be. So thank you all so much for being here. I always appreciate the crowds that show up on Sunday. I know it's not a great day for everyone, so if you watch it on a day after it's been recorded, I'm happy for you to be here too. But it's nice to see all these regulars. I'm very fortunate for you to be here, so thank you. I don't want to begin doing that just yet, but I would like your brains to think about the kind of pleasure that you would like to find yourself experiencing. And when you find yourself experiencing that, just take note of it. Take note of what it means for you to feel these things, to experience these things, how good that is for your mind to be in that space of just feeling super happy. And I think what I'm going to do first to start us off, maybe I will do a little bit of ASMR-y stuff. I love the way my fingers pop on this. Do you love that too? I may not really have fingernails, but they're still good at making the noise. Oops. When I was little, I lived in a house that had a porch outside my bedroom, sort of outside my bedroom. And the porch had a tin floor. And when the rain got really, really hard, we'd sometimes get some crazy rainstorms. The way that the rain sounded on that tin floor, I just love it so much. I also like storms a lot, so it probably all ties in together. But it kind of reminds me of something like that a little bit. I tried to bring in a whole bunch of things today that were shiny. So, not just the eye, which kind of lives here now, but also this is one of my favorite cocktail rings. It's fairly inexpensive and it's just shiny enough. But I like the way that the ring shines. And I like the way that the ring shines because I know it can capture attention. I know people can count the facets and drop deeply into trance. I know that you can find yourself giving in to how good it feels to listen and to watch and to let everything else go. Oh, I also, because I love the inexpensive rings, right? They're so fun. I also received a bag of those for Christmas. Might have to do some cleanup in here when I'm done. But it's so fun to have these on. It's so fun to just know that you could put all these shiny things on and you can just stack them. They don't all fit on all my fingers, unfortunately. Some of them only go down so far. But aren't they delightful? Aren't they fun to watch or to listen to give into? Are you supposed to fall asleep before trance? Nah. You can keep your eyes wide open. You can keep listening. Trance is not one size fits all state of sleep. It's simply an altered state. I like to think of it as an altered state where you can find yourself more suggestible, but human beings are really suggestible anyway. I think that we want to go into trance because it feels good and it feels different than when we're busy doing other stuff. When we're busy doing stuff that we have to do and we need to do, we don't necessarily get that same kind of experience, right? We don't necessarily have that same delight because we can't. We need to be able to focus on different things at different times, right? And so the more that we find ourselves happily in that state where we can just give in to how good it feels to not be fully awake, the better it is. It feels so good for our brains sometimes to take that little brief moment of I'm taking a break right here and right now, and I don't have to worry about anything else right here and right now. And because I don't have to worry about anything else right here and right now, it can feel even better than if you were deliberately saying, I'm going to go to sleep right now. So you don't have to go to sleep at all. There's no requirement for you to actually find yourself sleeping. There's no requirement for you to actually do anything. You can stay fully awake and just enjoy what this is like, which is admittedly kind of a strange experience, right? Like there might be other people out here that do something similar and your brain responds in a very, very different way. I don't know. But however you find yourself responding, whether it's to my weird, fun, sensationally sounds in hypnosis, this is just a little fun and a little preliminary. And mostly I do want to wait before we get to the pleasure part of today. So, but we're going to get there very, very soon. So let your brain think about how nice that feels, how good it is for your unconscious mind to just go, yep, we are absolutely happy to be here, to be listening, to think about what the pleasure means for us, to notice that our brain is primed and ready to give in, to focus on the sound of my voice or to focus on whatever it is that I end up holding up for you. But let your brain think about those things. Think about how fun that is. Think about nothing at all if you want. I'm trying to get my fingers stable so that nothing falls off of it when I begin this. But in the meantime, all the fun sounds. So, all right, here we go. Hopefully the ads are over and your brain can notice that this is the time for you to find yourself paying so much attention. I'm going to bring out a favorite, right? And allow yourself to focus on the eye. Maybe you find yourself focused right there in the middle. Maybe you find yourself liking the little sounds that I'll be making other than my voice. Maybe your brain can realize that now is the time to drop into trance, but you don't need to go to sleep. There's no requirement for sleep. You can keep your eyes open or keep your eyes closed. If you find yourself loving staring at the shiny things, maybe you keep your eyes open. If you find yourself loving sliding into that dark oblivion of delight. Maybe you close your eyes and you let your body get as comfortable as it possibly can. And you allow yourself to think about the pleasure that you found yourself thinking about earlier, but you can feel how good that is to just give in. So let your brain think about what that means to surrender to pleasure. Let your unconscious mind delight in the idea that while I talk about pleasure today, you're going to think of the kind of pleasure that you want to find yourself experiencing with your senses. Your senses are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel, both internally and externally, so emotions as well as touch. And then olfactory or gustatory, so what you can smell and what you can taste. However you find yourself choosing something to find pleasing, to find pleasurable, however you find yourself doing that, notice that it just can work for you as strongly as possible. If for some reason your brain says, nah, we're going to pick something else in the middle of it, then go ahead and go with it. It's your body, it's your mind, it's your choice. Have a good time with it. So as you find yourself getting comfortable, as you find yourself focusing on the sound of my voice, perhaps you find yourself sliding and dropping into a deep sleep, and perhaps you find yourself doing something else. But whatever works for you, let your unconscious mind think about that pleasure, or let your conscious self think about that pleasure that you want. And while you find yourself thinking about the pleasure that you want to experience, I'm going to run through each of those ideas again, and you can find yourself responding, i.e. noticing that that brings out a little something additional in you or not, and maybe that allows your brain to go, oh, maybe we should focus on this area. But there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no rush. Your brain simply can know that whether you find yourself smelling somebody's perfume, maybe you lean in to give somebody a hug and the hug feels good, but the perfume smells really, really great. I went to Italy a few years back, and I have to tell you that the people there smelled so good. Not necessarily the tourists, but the people that were just Italians walking around, going about their day-to-day business. Oh, they were yummy. So maybe your brain knows a sensation like that. Maybe your nose remembers that there was an apple pie that grandma was baking. Maybe your brain remembers that there was a candle that was phenomenal. Maybe your unconscious remembers there was an orange peel, maybe, that you opened the orange, you unpeeled it, and you got like a burst of that fresh citrus, and it smelled really amazing. Let's focus on the things that bring you pleasure, no matter how many others memories there might be out there. Allow your brain to think about something that you would find yourself really enjoying. Have you ever walked by a blooming flower bush and just like stuck your nose right in the flower that you saw? The more your brain can focus on the things that you find yourself liking, the better it becomes. But what if you're like, yeah, I really like those flowers. So the way we're going to intensify every single one of these experiences is to bring more of our senses into it. So you can find yourself focusing on just one, right? You can find yourself focusing on just one, like the smell of an apple pie, or the smell of a flower, or the smell of somebody's perfume. But when we really, really begin to anchor in these experiences as more and more powerful, we notice that they all have multiple versions of these things, multiple versions of our senses chime in. And sometimes that feeling, the kinesthetic part, the emotions really also kick in at that time. And if you can find yourself locking in as many of those as you possibly can, what you're going to realize that you have is something that is super special and super strong. So let your brain think about how good it is to smell whatever that is. And then let your brain add something extra sensory to that, or additionally sensory to that. So maybe you find yourself, if you're smelling, say, a peony, one of my favorite flowers, I like the way that they smell, which is not incredibly strongly, but maybe I am visually appreciating what that peony looks like. Maybe it is almost fully open and there's still a little round bud on the inside, because they're peonies. They get ants crawling on them too because the ants love them. For me, that just visually adds to the appeal. Maybe I reach out and I touch either the leaves or the petals of the flower. And maybe I notice that I'm not going to experience every sense in this particular instance, but I'm going to, add all those things together, and I'm going to get some quality of pleasure that really is meaningful to me. Allow your unconscious mind, as it thinks about something like that, to just let whatever your pleasure is, to add in as many of those details as you can. What did I see? What did I feel? What did I touch? What did I smell? What did I taste? And how did it affect me? Because we can certainly look at something that's beautiful without really, we can appreciate it on a surface level, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're experiencing something that is really profound for us. We like it, it gives us momentary pleasure, but maybe we're not going to go back to it. So let your unconscious mind think about what that means. What kind of delights and pleasures are the ones that you're going to find yourself appreciating in the moment that they happen and not returning to it? And which are the ones that are going to really impact us profoundly? Maybe you find yourself thinking about, if you have a partner, meeting your partner. And one of the times you meet your partner, there's something about them that attracts you to them. Often it's visually first, but that doesn't necessarily mean it always is. Sometimes we might hear the sound of their voice first, and maybe the sound of their voice causes a little tingle to run down the back of our neck, much like ASMR stuff. And maybe the more we find ourselves appreciating that idea that, when we meet somebody, there's something really strong about that. There's something really attractive about that. We can notice that items that attract us in any of our senses can begin to be good foundations for us to have a really, really powerful experience. Can be really good foundations for us to keep adding additional things to that. And then we have a full-blown experience that encompasses as many of our senses as we possibly can. And the more we find ourselves experiencing those things, and again, they don't have to include all of our senses in order for us to have something that is powerful and amazing happening. So let your brain think about that a little bit more. Let your brain add in those images, those sounds, those thoughts, those feelings, the smells, the tastes. And as your brain adds one in by another, perhaps you notice that you add something in and it doesn't make it any better. So go ahead and take that out. Maybe your brain just realizes that it becomes so good to add a little bit more every time. Or maybe instead of adding a little bit more every time, you find yourself additionally thinking about other things in the same sense. For example, maybe you find yourself thinking about this, and the thing you're thinking about is visual. So what you can do to enhance a visual pleasure is to bring it closer, right? So you can bring it closer. So look you can see so much more detail when it's bigger and brighter and bolder, right? So we bring it closer, it becomes shinier, it becomes more brightly lit, and your brain responds in a different way to this than it does to when it's back here. So you can allow your brain to just amplify the thing you find yourself thinking about, and you can make it bigger and brighter and bolder and stronger. If it's a smell, you can make it stronger so that if it was something that you just caught a wisp of, you can discover that you find the source. Maybe the source is too much, so you need to back off a little bit. Allow yourself to play around with these senses until you are at the right space for you that allows you to feel so good about this and allows you to know that this is a thing that you can find yourself experiencing pleasure-wise again and again and again. Allow yourself to know that maybe if this was just a picture of a thing and it was very still, it wouldn't quite be as effective as if it was gently moving and all the crystals were catching the light. So allow your brain to think about the ways in which you can notice this. Maybe a picture has a temperature. Now maybe this one doesn't have a temperature, but maybe you find yourself thinking about a place that you love to go or a place that you love to be. and the place itself brings you pleasure. And maybe you go to a place that is, say, a lovely beach somewhere warm. Not hot, but beautifully warm. Maybe you like to go skiing and you can imagine a perfect ski lodge experience for yourself. And you can know that you're dressed appropriately, but when you go outside, it's going to be crisp and cold. And that in itself is going to bring you another sense, another layer of that delight and that pleasure. Maybe you find yourself going out and imagining that you're in a restaurant, or you're making something at home because you're a good cook, or you make something that allows you to feel comfort. Let your brain think about what that means. When you find yourself experiencing some kind of comfort food, it may not be the most gourmet food we've ever had, right? But it reminds you, it brings in those emotions, so it ties that in. It brings us back to perhaps a memory of when we had this, or who we were with when we had that. And it allows our brain to, on its own, increase the amount of senses that we are incorporating into this. And the more we can allow ourselves to remember and experience and to add it into something that we're doing right now, the stronger and more powerful those feelings and those sensations can be. So when we find ourselves, for example, thinking about what something tastes like, or what something smells like, or what something looks like, the more of those sensations, the more of those senses that we can bring in, the more specific we can get. Is this moving or still? Is there a temperature associated with this? Are there other people around? Are there other sounds or noises? Or maybe it's just perfectly still and quiet. How does this allow our brain to just go, oh, this is exactly right? How does this allow our brain to go, oh, I want to just take a moment. I need to stop and appreciate this right here. How does this allow us to know that if we are experiencing, say, a sexual pleasure, how can we tie all these things together? Because there might be a lot more motion with something that's a little bit sexual versus something that isn't. Let your unconscious mind think about that. Allow those thoughts and those ideas to come together as much as you can possibly make that happen. And the more that those ideas and those senses and those pleasures all tie together, because you can have pleasure in each and every one of those experiences. In each and every sense you can experience pleasure. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you bring pleasure of all of these things together that they meld in exactly the right way that exponentially increases how you feel. But pleasure is, by and large, a product of our senses and how we feel about something. So go ahead and let your unconscious mind think more and more about the pleasure of the sense of touch. This feels pretty good right now because there's all those little gems over the front of this, so it's got a little texture. I can add in a sense of sound. I'm looking at it. I like the eyes as a representation of going deeply into trance. And I like knowing that my unconscious mind likes the shine, that I am attracted to shiny things, and I find myself happy to look at those. Is happiness a precursor to your kind of pleasure, or do you like when something riles you up and you feel like a sense of passion that explodes out of you? However your brain wants to experience that, just let yourself think about that even more strongly right now. Let your unconscious mind delight in how fascinating it is for you to be able to know the kind of pleasure seeker that you are, the kind of pleasure enjoyer that you are, and to tie into that as strongly as you can. And the more you find yourself tying into that as strongly as you can let your brain appreciate what it's good at. Allow your unconscious mind to appreciate what it's good at. And the more your brain can appreciate what it's good at, the more you can let those sensations and those feelings get a little bit stronger. They can intensify. It can feel really, really good for your brain to know that you can find yourself thinking about something, and all of a sudden you can imagine an experience so vivid with as many of those sensations as you want that it's almost like you're there. So this is what can happen to people in a PTSD moment. I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I just want to say that there are ways to undo that sort of thing, but let's let your pleasure simply be a thing that you can find yourself enjoying returning to. That you can find yourself noticing how strong it can be, and for your unconscious mind to be so happy to be right there, to be right in the middle of it, to let it get as good for you as you would like it to be. You don't need to have it become so powerful that you can return to it in a blink of an eye and anything might cause it, or you might. If you're doing something that feels good for you, it's possible that your brain knows that it can return to something so strong, like you can experience the exact same thing, almost like being in a movie, being in the situation, and your brain recalls it so strongly, right? But do that with pleasure. Do that with pleasurable things and delightful things. You can do your very best to distance/disassociate yourself from things that aren't wonderful for you to experience in your past, and allow your future self to build on how good all these experiences can be. And the more your brain thinks about how good these experiences can be, the easier it is for you to just know that you're going to surrender and give in to the sounds and to how they make you feel. Ultimately, the way that something makes us feel is the way that we find ourselves returning to it and seeking those things out. Just because something tastes really good, we might return to it. We might be like, oh, well, I like this food, I'm going to go back, since we are likely to eat multiple times a day. But notice that sometimes something that is so good is the sort of thing that we can find ourselves reveling in again and again, whether or not we have it. We can think about it and be back in that situation. So let your brain think about how good that is. Now, when I do something like hands-free orgasm training for people and with people, I do what I call calibration. And by that I mean I like to use a scale of 1 to 10. It's easy for me. I don't have to remember each individual person's specifics for that. So how do I calibrate so that everyone can have the same experience? Well, you can't always make sure that's a thing that happens, but you can focus on the lowest common denominator and hope that the people that are very responsive to pleasure and to suggestion know what their upper limit is or are willing to expand their upper limit. So I do something like do a sequence of words and phrases and suggestions that allow you to think about the things that bring you pleasure sexually. If this is not for you, you do not have to listen to this right now. You do not have to participate. If you're okay with being here, let yourself just hear this on an educational level. So your brain, I go through things that allow you to think about what brings you pleasure with all of your senses. And when you think about things which bring you pleasure with all of your senses, we begin to increase them. And I will go up and increase them mentally with you until we should be at, you should be at, and I think we should be at, say, a 5. And then I ask you where you actually are. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? How much pleasure do you actually think that you're feeling? What does that mean for you? And I talk about that as though you're off. You're just generally you hanging out and the pleasure is off. And then we turn your ability to feel that kind of pleasure on. And that's an important thing for you to know, because you don't have to turn sexual pleasure on. It doesn't have to be on all the time. It is a thing that you can choose, you can elect to have turned on for you. And if you're okay with that and you elect to turn that on, we just turn that on. And then we do that pleasure so that your brain is thinking about all the things which do bring you pleasure. your sense of taste, your sense of touch, your smells, what you see, what you hear. And in a sexual context, that could be all sorts of things. So fill in your blanks, the things that your unconscious mind knows that you find yourself experiencing in a pleasurable way. And let those intensify until I think you should be at 5. What does what I think matter? And then you tell me where you are. And then together we do our very best to make where you are. Say you're like, oh, I'm only at a 2. And I'm like, great. That 5 is going to be your new 2. And then we're just going to go up from there. And you can do this again and again and again until somebody has been calibrated to that 0 to 10 scale. Let me tell you, there are some people who can experience pleasure and want to experience pleasure, but only get up to like a 3 or a 4. And people around them have been able to get up to 10 like that, so that their 10, instead of, going the other way, so their 10 now becomes their new 7. So think of how much more pleasure you can experience in any of those situations. Oh, so this is only a 2. Well, I have a ways that I can move. I have a whole bunch of more pleasure that I can experience. And if you were at a 9 and we move that back down to say a 7, it's because we don't want you to experience too much pleasure too soon. But honestly, it's okay if you decide that there is a pleasure that you want to experience. I'm not here to limit you. It's a calibration just of that 0 to 10, but within that, you could certainly find yourself experiencing any kind of pleasure you might want. If 10 is that instant orgasm, think of the scale of pleasure that you could find yourself experiencing, whether it happens to be an instant orgasm or whether it's just the pleasure that leads up to it and makes you lie there drooling. All of that is totally good and totally fine. And the more your brain feels how good it is for you to be in that place of pleasure, for you to think about the things that literally turn you on, not just the find yourself on right now, for example, but thinking about the things that literally and actually turn you on can become even more powerful than you realized. And your brain can notice that the more you find yourself in that state of acknowledging that you can mentally be turned on by things that you think about, that you experienced in a sense factory way, that you can think about those and let your brain enhance all of those for you. So let yourself drop and sink down deeper and deeper while your unconscious mind just goes, you know what? Yes, I remember all those things that I really, really like, or if you've never experienced them, that you might have read about or heard about. And then your brain can think about how that might affect you physically and mentally. And the more your brain thinks about, again, all the things, bring in every sense that you can that works. If a sense doesn't work, let it go. But if a sense really works for you to feel more pleasure, bring that in and enhance it. Allow yourself to think about what that means and how you can possibly make that even better for yourself. And your brain can feel how incredibly right that is as you find yourself experiencing something that feels even more pleasurable than it did before. Maybe it's a touch in a new spot on your body, or maybe it's a different kind of touch on your body than you've ever experienced before. Maybe it's the thing that you always wished somebody would do to you or for you. Maybe it's the right thing that was said. Maybe you really like saying or using dirty talk, and you've never had that experience. And those phrases and those words are key to you just feeling so much more pleasure than you ever did before. Maybe you like the idea of certain positions. Maybe you like the idea of certain sensations. In your brain, nothing is wrong about that. So let your brain think about how you can achieve that. Let your unconscious mind think about the ways in which it can increase sensitivity in your skin so that you can discover what those things feel like, perhaps without even having to necessarily actually experience them, to allow your unconscious mind, much like the idea with your hand and arm rising up and feeling lighter and lighter, like there are balloons tied to it. You can also find yourself holding a stack of heavy, heavy, heavy books, right? And feeling your arm press down. You can notice that your skin sensitivity can be adjusted to heighten or deaden it. And it can also be moved around so that certain places become more and or less sensitive for you in the midst of everything. So let your brain hold on to those thoughts. Let your unconscious mind delight in all the ways in which you can craft an experience for you that begins to be even more powerful than it ever has been before. And the more your brain gets to that point where it does, in fact, let you feel sensations imaginatively, that your brain can allow a finger tracing down your body. It can allow a gust of breath somewhere on your body. You can find yourself feeling that sensation of a touch. And it can begin in your brain and spread out through the rest of your body until you find yourself knowing that you're at this point where you literally can experience powerful pleasure. Now, there's a thing that I find myself liking to do recently, which is for your brain to imagine that as I say these things, your unconscious mind answers two questions positively. And the first is, can you do this? And the second is, will you do this, whether it's now or in the future? And you can find yourself perhaps unconsciously touching your forehead, because your hand and arm can rise up and feel super light. And so it's easy unconsciously to just touch that spot on your forehead, right? You could pick any other place. When I do sessions, I like to see people, so that's easiest for me. But you can pick any session that you want to be in. And your brain can notice that as you find yourself thinking and saying, I can do that unconsciously, I will do that unconsciously, and you do it, and you tap that spot on your forehead, it can allow you to associate that pleasure and that tap, wherever that tap happens to be. So hold on to how good all of those things can be. Allow your unconscious mind to say yes for you and to you as often as you possibly can. Allow the sense of pleasure that you can find yourself experiencing to get even stronger. We can talk about, and I think I have talked about before, we can talk about anchoring pleasures in for a little bit. So for example, if I was to ask you to think about and to fully inhabit as much as you possibly can, as much pleasure as you can recall that you have ever had before, up to and including, say, an orgasm. Allow your brain to think about everything that went along with that, right? Let that get as powerful as it possibly can for you. And what you do then, I usually use the back of the wrist right about there. I'll touch it, or you can touch it, since we're not in the same space, fortunately, this very tiny room. And then when you are almost at that point, you hold and touch, and then you let go at about 100%, right? You have to have the wherewithal to be able to do that while you're experiencing so much pleasure. Then you shake it off, right? And then you don't experience anything. And then you find yourself back in that space, and you can do it again. And then you can increase what that feels like. You can just go up your arm, and the pleasure that you felt can get even stronger until you go, say, all the way back up to the shoulder, all the way up to the shoulder. And by the time you get here, the pleasure should be so much better, so much more incredible than it was when it was here. And then you can say, well, okay, I'm going to make this experience more calibration, right? I'm going to make this your new this. So when you touch this now, it just feels so incredibly good, just like it did when your hand got all the way to your shoulder. And if you want to make it stronger, you can make it stronger. You can continue to do this with all sorts of things. This is just anchoring a touch, a feeling, a sensation. And you can notice how incredibly powerful those pleasurable sensations can become. You don't have to do it with simply sexual situations. You could do it with almost anything so that you get more pleasure out of something. What if you're the kind of person who, what if you tend to be nose blind, and in your profession you need to be nose blind for something, but you wish that when you're out and about you got more pleasure just from the good smells that were around you? You can also do that. You can also associate, if you've had bad touch, you can find a way to make sure that your brain says, oh, well, this touch is good, and then we're going to anchor in that good touch. And then we're going to make that good touch a little bit better. You can also, of course, go the other way and get rid of sensations or get rid of your strong responses to sense experiences by going down. And you can get rid of things that way. There's another thing I'm not going to do today because I'm holding something and it would require both hands. But I will talk about collapsing anchors another day. But in the meantime, let your unconscious mind think about all the ways in which you want to experience pleasure. Let your brain think about all the ways in which you have experienced pleasure in the past and allow that as a jumping off point, whether that is imaginary or actual. So if you've just simply been in a state where you've like read something or you've seen something and you're like, oh my God, that is so hot, I want to do that. Allow your brain to know that you can, in fact, take that as a jumping off place, and you don't really have to worry too much about having had that experience already for yourself, okay? You can absolutely take a fantasy and turn it into a real feeling and a real experience for your brain. And the more you find yourself in that space of knowing what your unconscious mind is capable of doing, the better it's going to get for you. The easier it is for your unconscious mind it's easy for you to take something that you've experienced or that you've read about to make that happen, but let it just get as strong as it can, and then notice that you can self-calibrate all of these things. You can make sure that your brain goes, oh, you'd really like to experience this 10 times more strongly. I know, it's a trope, just go with it. Allow your brain to think that it can, actually do that kind of math, even though it's not really math. We're combining a bunch of things there. So your unconscious mind can understand that there's something that was good, you would like to make it better. You can make it better by using as many of your senses as you can. You can make it better by setting a scale for yourself and then calibrating where exactly you fall and then doing all the things that really excite you and turn you on about anything to get to a higher number, to get to a higher number, to get to a higher number until you reach the results that you're looking for. So your brain isn't holding you back. It really wants to help you experience all these things. Allow yourself to just delight in knowing how good all those things feel. On the count of 10, you can find yourself coming back all the way to full consciousness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, opening up your eyes if they were closed. 8, taking in a nice deep breath. 9, shifting and adjusting your body and your muscles a little bit. And 10, all the way back. I want to thank you all for being here. No homework today. If you like this, please like, or if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I'm usually here every Sunday. Here most Sundays, let's put it like that. I'm usually here most Sundays at about 3 p.m. Eastern, and I'm happy to take suggestions on things that you would like to do. Sometimes I ask in the moment, and sometimes I like them ahead of time. But whatever your brain wants to do, if you want to find yourself doing a thing hypnotically, drop me a note or put it in the comments, and I will be happy to entertain other fun ideas. So thank you. I'm sorry you were late. I hope you can be with us again, but you can watch this anytime. It's the live it just turns into a regular video. I would love to know how wild that was, in which ways that was. John, that sounds really thrilling. I'm glad you got to experience that. And it's nice for you to be here, Lawrence. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great day. I will return next week. And when I return, we'll be doing something completely and totally different. And I don't know what that is. Well, it'll still be hypnosis. So, all right. Thank you very much for being here. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.